The full moon didn't end last night. In fact, it started something crucial. Most people think the moment has passed. It felt intense, maybe even important. And now it's quiet, so they assume nothing really happened. That's the mistake. This phase was never meant to be loud. The pink moon sets things in motion and then immediately removes the noise so it can unfold without interruption. And that stillness is what throws people off, because it doesn't try to convince you that anything is happening, but something already is. And most people are going to miss it because they don't know what's happening. This wasn't just a full moon. This one leaves a trail, and most people have no idea what they just walked into. The pink moon isn't soft. It's named after the first flowers that break through the ground in April, but what people don't realize is how that actually happens. That growth isn't calm, it's forceful. It pushes through cold, hardened ground that hasn't moved for months. That's the energy now, not slow progress, not gentle change. Sudden movement in places that have been completely stuck. Things that gave you nothing are about to respond. Situations that stayed silent are about to move. And it won't build up gradually. It'll happen all at once, almost out of nowhere. That's the pink phase effect. And most people are going to miss it, not because it's small, but because they don't know what to look for. But don't worry, I'll go over it. What makes this phase powerful isn't what you can see today, it's what's already being arranged behind the scenes. Right now, 3 areas of your life are being quietly reorganized, and you're going to start noticing the results over the next couple of weeks, not all at once, but in ways that feel too precise to ignore. First, relationships. This isn't about dramatic endings or sudden new people rushing in. It's quieter than that. The wrong connections begin to loosen on their own. Conversations fade without effort. At the same time, the right people start moving closer, almost naturally, without you forcing anything. It's subtle, but it's exact. The right people don't arrive loudly, they just stop feeling distant. Second, your direction. Not a sudden realization, not a moment where everything becomes clear overnight. It's more like a slow pull that you can't shake. One path starts to feel heavier, more real, harder to ignore, while everything else starts losing its grip on you. You don't decide it, it becomes obvious. Clarity doesn't shout, it repeats itself until you stop resisting it. And third, resources and opportunities. Not in the way people usually talk about it. This isn't about chasing something new, it's about things that were stuck, finally starting to move again. Conversations that went nowhere, suddenly picking back up. Situations that felt closed, quietly opening without warning. Things that felt impossible not long ago start to feel workable. The moment things start moving again, you realize they were never blocked, just waiting for the right timing. And the part most people miss is this. None of this requires you to force anything right now. This phase doesn't reward effort, it rewards alignment. All you really have to do is not interrupt what's already unfolding. Once the intensity fades, something very specific happens, and almost no one pays attention to it. You go back to your default, not because you choose to, but because it's what feels natural when nothing is pushing you, when there's no excitement, no pressure, no strong emotions. You fall back into the version of yourself that runs automatically. That's the version most people never question. And this phase makes it visible. How you think when nothing is happening. How you move when there's no urgency. What you focus on when there's no external pressure guiding you. That's your baseline. And whether people realize it or not, that baseline is what shapes everything that comes next. Your future isn't built in your peak moments, it's built in what you return to when the moment is over. This is where the real shift happens, because now you're not being carried by energy or momentum. You're seeing exactly who you are without it. And that version of you is either quietly building what's next or quietly repeating what already was. There's a part of this moon that most people completely overlook, and it's not about balance in the way people casually talk about it. Libra doesn't just balance things out, it keeps score. Every time you overgave, over-explained, or stayed longer than you should have, it was being recorded. Not emotionally, not dramatically, just accurately. And this moon didn't create a reaction. It collected what was already owed. That's why for a lot of people something feels different now. Not explosive, not emotional, just finished. You look at something that used to pull you in, and it simply doesn't have the same effect anymore. You're not trying to detach. You already did. The moment you stop negotiating with something, it loses all power over you. This is what enough actually feels like. It's not loud. It doesn't need closure or confrontation. It just removes your willingness to keep participating in what drained you. And that's the shift. Because most people think growth looks like adding something new. But this phase shows you something more important. What you no longer tolerate defines you faster than what you chase. Being done is not an ending. It's the moment your life stops leaking energy. And once something reaches that point, it doesn't come back the same way again. There's a very specific moment that happens around this phase, and if you pay attention, you can trace it back clearly. That thing you almost said. Not something abstract, something real. A message you typed out and stared at for minutes before deleting. A conversation you rehearsed in your head but never actually had. A realization that hit you so directly you had to distract yourself just to not deal with it. That wasn't random. This moon didn't just shift your environment. It brought you face to face with the exact truth you've been avoiding. Because there's a tension here that's been building for a while. On one side, you've had the instinct to keep things smooth, avoid disruption, keep everything manageable. On the other side, there's been a quiet pressure building, something inside you that knows things aren't fully aligned. And for a long time, you've been balancing both. Saying just enough, but not everything. Acknowledging the issue, but not acting on it. Staying aware, but not fully honest. This phase removes that middle ground. The truth doesn't become urgent until you've delayed it long enough. That's why it feels different now. It's no longer something you can lightly think about and move on from. It's sharper, more defined. It keeps coming back, not as a feeling, but as a clear recognition. You look at a situation and you don't just feel uncertain. You know exactly what's off. You know what needs to be said, what needs to change, what you've been tolerating longer than you should have. And that clarity is uncomfortable because it doesn't leave room to pretend anymore. You're not confused. You're hesitating. The hardest part isn't knowing the truth. It's accepting that you already do. This is where a lot of people try to pull back. They try to soften it, delay it again, convince themselves it's not the right time. But this phase doesn't let that fully work anymore. Because something inside you has already shifted. It's no longer asking for permission to be honest. It's just waiting for you to catch up to it. And when that moment hits, whether you say it out loud or not, it changes things immediately. Not in a chaotic way, not in a dramatic explosion, but in a clean, irreversible adjustment. You stop entertaining what you already know isn't right. You stop giving energy to what you've already outgrown. You stop negotiating with something that no longer makes sense. The moment you stop lying to yourself, your entire direction corrects. And that's why this feels intense in a different way. It's not emotional. It's not overwhelming. It's precise. You're not being pushed into something new. You're being pulled out of something that no longer fits. And now, it's time for today's comment of the day. Don't let the wind blow you, but allow the wind to take you in the direction you want to go, utilize its strength, and let it be the fuel for your fire. This one paints a picture. Life throws a lot at you: pressure, change, unexpected situations, and it's easy to feel like you're being pushed around by it. But this flips that. Instead of resisting everything or being controlled by it, you use it. You take what comes your way and redirect it. You turn pressure into momentum. Same wind, different outcome. The difference is in how you respond to it. Thank you for sharing this perspective. After everything settles, something very clear begins to stand out. What's still here? Not everything makes it through a phase like this. Some things lose their grip, some things fade out quietly, and some things just stop making sense the way they used to. But what remains after that process isn't random. It passed through something. It stayed when other things couldn't. And that's the part most people underestimate. Because what survives this phase doesn't just stay. It stabilizes first, and then it begins to move. It won't feel forced. It won't feel like you're trying to hold it together or constantly push it forward. It will feel natural, almost like it's carrying its own momentum without needing your effort to sustain it. The things that stay without effort are the things that are built to grow. And once something proves, it can stay under no pressure, no intensity, no emotional high, that's when it starts expanding. But in a way that feels surprisingly fast compared to how stuck everything felt before. You might notice this in small ways at first. Something that felt minor starts gaining importance. A connection that felt simple starts becoming consistent. A direction that felt uncertain starts opening up with real opportunities attached to it. And the key difference is you're not chasing any of it. It's moving because it can, not because you're forcing it to. Growth becomes fast the moment resistance is gone. That's why this phase is so important. It removes everything that was slowing things down, everything that needed constant energy just to exist. And once that weight is gone, what remains doesn't struggle to move forward. It naturally does. You're no longer trying to figure out what works. You're watching what continues without effort. There's something final about this phase that people don't take seriously enough. A full moon isn't just symbolic, it marks a peak, which means whatever reached its highest point last night has already begun its decline. And that matters more than people think. Because whatever you've been dealing with, whether it's pressure, confusion, attachment, or something that felt like it kept growing, it already hit its ceiling. It cannot go beyond what it was at that exact moment. Not later this week, not next month. That was the peak. The worst version of something has already happened. It just hasn't fully left yet. From here, it doesn't expand. It unwinds. That thing that felt overwhelming, it's no longer building. It's slowly losing structure, whether you can see it yet or not. And the reason this is powerful is because most people keep treating it like it can still grow, like it still has the same strength, but it doesn't. You're no longer inside the storm. You're watching what's left of it pass. And once something starts descending from its peak, there's no returning it to that same intensity again. That chapter didn't just shift, it reached its limit. One of the most noticeable shifts after this moon is how quickly things lose their intensity. Something that felt urgent, meaningful, or even overwhelming just a few days ago now feels neutral. Not bad, not wrong, just not as gripping as it was. Conversations feel flatter. Situations that once pulled your attention now barely hold it. Even things you thought mattered a lot suddenly feel like they've lost their weight. And this is where most people start to question themselves. They think something is off. They think they lost motivation, or that they've fallen out of alignment, or that whatever they felt before wasn't real. But what actually happened is much more precise than that. The intensity didn't disappear randomly, it was removed on purpose. The full moon amplifies everything. It stretches your perception, heightens your reactions, and makes things feel bigger so you can't ignore them. It puts everything under a spotlight. But once that spotlight turns off, what remains is no longer exaggerated. And that's where clarity takes over. The moment the intensity drops, the truth stops hiding behind it. This is the phase where you start seeing things without emotional distortion. Not through excitement, not through pressure, not through temporary highs, but through consistency. And consistency is harder to argue with, because excitement can make anything feel right. It can pull you into things that only feel good at their peak, but don't actually hold up over time. It can convince you something is important just because it feels intense in the moment. But when that intensity fades, whatever is left is what's real. Excitement can lie to you, but consistency never does. That's why this phase feels so different. You're no longer reacting to the peak version of something, you're interacting with its baseline. And that baseline tells you everything you need to know. If something still feels right without the emotional charge, it's solid. If it suddenly feels empty or unnecessary, then it was never as important as it seemed. It was just amplified. This is where your decisions start to change without force. You don't need to convince yourself to walk away from something that no longer holds your attention. You don't need to overanalyze what feels clear. The emotional noise is gone, so the answer becomes obvious. The absence of excitement is not a loss. It's the removal of illusion. And once you understand that, you stop chasing the high. You stop needing things to feel intense in order to feel meaningful. You stop measuring your direction based on how emotionally charged something is. Instead, you start trusting what stays steady. Because what survives without intensity is what's actually built to last. Earlier phases always feel loud. There's pressure, movement, signs, moments that feel like they're trying to get your attention. It's almost like something is constantly stepping in, correcting you, redirecting you, forcing you to notice what you've been avoiding. But now, that presence has stepped back. And for a lot of people, that's where confusion starts. Because when you've been used to being guided, silence feels like something is missing. It can feel like you've been left alone with no signal, no confirmation, no push telling you what to do next. But that silence isn't a loss of connection. It's a change in position. The noise disappears when you no longer need to be directed. Nothing is trying to get your attention anymore because nothing needs to. You've already seen it. The clarity already landed. The shift already happened. Now it's on you. And that's what makes this phase different from everything before it. Before, you were being shown. Now, you're expected to move. That's why there's no urgency, no emotional pressure, no overwhelming signals trying to wake you up. Because you're not being woken up anymore, you're already aware. The moment you stop needing signs, you become the one who decides. And that realization can feel heavy at first because it removes excuses. You can't say you don't know. You can't say you're waiting for the right moment or the right feeling. You're not being held in place anymore. You're being trusted to act from what you already understand. And that's a completely different kind of power. Because earlier, movement came from reaction. Something happened, something felt intense, and you responded to it. Now, movement comes from clarity. You move because it's obvious, not because it's exciting. You decide because it's right, not because something pushed you into it. And that kind of movement is quieter, but it's also far more stable. Being trusted doesn't feel intense. It feels calm, and that's why people overlook it. There's no rush, because there's no confusion left to resolve. There's no pressure, because nothing needs to break through anymore. Everything is already clear. And in that kind of silence, your actions start to carry more weight. Not because they're dramatic, but because they're precise. You're no longer reacting to moments, you're choosing direction. And once you reach that point, you stop looking for confirmation entirely. And if you're still here, still watching, I genuinely appreciate it. This phase isn't loud. It doesn't try to convince you. It just leaves you with something clear, something steady, and trusts you to recognize it. If something in this message stayed with you, even in a small way, then you're already in the part most people miss. You're not waiting for things to begin. You're already inside the part where they quietly start moving. So as the next days unfold, don't rush to make sense of everything. You don't need to chase clarity or force direction. Just stay with what feels real now. Because what's meant to grow from here won't need pressure. It will meet you naturally, and it will stay.